Sup guys, I just got back from watching the new Blade Runner film, that is Blade Runner 2049, or 2049 as is colloquially known. And I have to say, it was the wrong title. It should have been called Blade Crawler, because the pace that it rolls at was very slow. It's a very, very slow-paced film. Now, I figured it probably would be, considering that's what Blade Runner was, but Blade Runner, the 80s version, the pre-version to Blade Runner 2049, that one, the old one, has a much different atmosphere, which is fine to be dragged out, because you just feel more immersed in the world by having it be dragged out like that. Now, it's not really that fair to criticize a film based on its prequel and just say, oh, it wasn't as good as the first one. You know, it's just to think of it as a standalone film. As a standalone film, it draws way too heavily on the previous film to stand alone as a film. So, I don't think that quite counts. As far as taking it in the direction and using the original material that they had, you know, obviously because of how influential Blade Runner was, and that was 35 years ago, how good it looked then and still does today. It does not look dated. The music, the atmosphere, everything about it is still as good as it was. Maybe it's even better now, because no one's going to recreate the original, anything that looks as near as good as the original Blade Runner. But in this version, the sequel, the sequel version of the universe, they decided to just get rid of all that just gritty dystopian atmosphere that was real, and they've just decided, nah, fuck that, we're gonna go for some cheap CG sci-fi. And then they decided, hey, you know what, we don't need good music in this film, we're just gonna go with some real shitty generic music. That's, in fact, the music in Blade Runner 2049 is actually more annoying than if there were no music there at all. I think maybe it would have been cringy to for them to have replicated the original, like, Evangelist kind of style for Blade Runner. It would have been cringy to replicate it, but they took it in such a new direction that it wasn't even appropriate. It just felt wrong. So immediately, the look is wrong, the sound is wrong. You fucked with the look and feel. Now, what next? The story? Yeah, just fuck with the story and then say, well, without getting into spoilers, I guess, because it's like quite recent film, but changing our perception of the previous film in a way that wasn't made clear in the previous film, as a kind of just like, oh yeah, you know what you thought? That was a little bit wrong. So, I know this is a shit review, and I'm gonna end it like right now, because I'm really tired. But I just have to say, yeah, the film, it was still fucking really good, but it was like in your mind, in the mind, it was competing with Blade Runner, and you can't really do that. So even the sequel can't compete with Blade Runner, and it's set in the same universe with some of the same characters. I don't know why they thought it was a good idea. Get a different director, get different music, get different everything, and then try and just slap Blade Runner on it. They shouldn't have done that, really. I think that was the biggest mistake, was calling it Blade Runner. Like I said, it should have been called Blade Crawler 0.5, because that's the speed it feels like you're watching it at. If you had the option to just sort of watch it at maybe 3 times speed, it might be a great film. It would just probably feel like a really generic action movie at that point. But hey, that's probably the best way to watch it, sped up. No, I don't know. Maybe I didn't enjoy it so much because I needed to fart the entire time, and I didn't, because obviously you can't just fart while you're watching a film. But my stomach was like bubbling and churning, and I'm just thinking, oh, this is really painful. I really would like to fart, but then I didn't want to miss the film, because as slow as it was, and as little as I would have missed if I'd have left to fart, I do think that you need to at least respect the sort of the slow-paced filling of an atmosphere. I didn't like how that atmosphere was intended to be tense the entire way through. Like, oh, suspense, 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 mystery and suspense. Suspense and mystery. Let's throw in a little bit more suspense here. You know what, guys? Let's chuck in a little bit more mystery and a twist. You know what we need to do? We need to slow this down. You know what we need more here? More bass. Let's put some bass on. That's what they like to do in that film. Now, it was good, but it was not the right mood or atmosphere that you would expect from Blade Runner. It's like, of course, they wanted to make it different and unique, but the things that made Blade Runner good were the things like the atmosphere and the vibe. So just changing that is like kind of pointless. I mean, the story of Blade Runner, there wasn't much story. As right, in my opinion, the story was the least interesting part of Blade Runner. The most interesting parts were the way it looks and the way it sounds. Just, it's really fucking insane with the lighting, the smoke everywhere, and the fucking synths, as in music, not the synthetic people. But those are cool too, even though they're just people. That was cool. That was like, that blows my mind. I could just rewatch Blade Runner just to live in that universe, to rewatch it and feel that. Blade Runner 2049 tries to tell a story though. They try to make you feel tension and suspense, and they try to just skirt over a bunch of really important facts that a lot of things where it's like that's a plot hole, that's stupid, that wouldn't work, people wouldn't do that. They want you to think about it and be there, but they want you to but the things that they present in the film are just so stupid. None of the character motivations are reasonable. I guess there are explanations for everything, but it just felt wrong. That's the simplest way I can describe Blade Runner. Blade Runner 2049 was wrong, and that's like wrong music, wrong atmosphere, wrong story, wrong everything about it. Just felt wrong. It was still great. Like, I know I'm like really fucking trying to chip away at it a little, but it was good. Not anywhere near as good as it should have been, using the Blade Runner universe. I mean, if it had have just copied the atmosphere of the original, it would have just been a copy, which would have made it pointless. So I get that in some sense, but the direction they've taken it in now, and I don't know if that's getting a sequel or not, I've not looked into it, but if they do a sequel to Blade Runner 2049, or like, what would that be? Blade Runner 2050, Blade Runner 2020, Blade Runner 2012, Coney 2012, or a prequel, Blade Runner 100. It's just a guy running around with a sword. Um, that's my review of the new Blade Runner film. I've got nothing more to say. I'll talk in it more detail when I'm not so tired, but there are lots of interesting concepts. It's one of those films where the majority of the film is based within your mind, using all of the references and experiences you've had outside of the film, which is fine, I guess, but there needs to be more going on in that film universe to really warrant that. Like, it can't be the same things over and over again. Like, I'm being very cryptic here, but when I watch sci-fi films that are that slow paced, a lot of it ends up being just me thinking about, that would be interesting if that was like that, but I also saw this other thing that works this way. This is how these robots worked, or this machine worked like this, and you start coming up with ideas of how would that affect me if I was there and if that was my life, and you start putting yourself in there and the experiences of other characters in other films that you've seen. You start just asking questions in your head, but the questions that you're asking yourself are not about what's happening on screen. The questions are about other things related to that, so you're having like a separate experience. That's what I find happens a lot with films that are so slowly paced like this and presenting interesting concepts and then doing nothing with them. It's just, hey, look, the guys in the writing room or the guys in set design thought this would be cool, so they do it, and then it's gone, and you're just thinking, well, I would have liked to see more of that and less of the sort of generic story. Less generic story and more cool, futuristic, just dystopian stuff. They really don't go into the dystopia that much. They kind of keep it really streamlined to and take away all of the interesting elements of a future lifestyle and make it as focused as they can on the boring parts about it. It's like there are very interesting things in that universe happening, very interesting technologies, very interesting lifestyles, very interesting culture, but they don't go into it at all. They just focus on I'm a guy who has to go around shooting and looking super serious. I mean, Ryan Gosling, he's cool, and you can't hate Ryan Gosling at all. I'm not advocating that you would. I'm just saying that what they're getting him to do in the film is the least interesting part about the film is the main character's story. The world, once again, the world was the thing that made Blade Runner great. To me, not the story. So they focused way too much on telling this little narrative when they should have been focusing on the dystopia. That's kind of what I was trying to say before. I will come back to this at some point, but that's my rough analysis, considering I watched the film I finished watching it about an hour ago. So while it's fresh in my head, that's what I thought about it. And yeah, I'm looking forward to replicants and to AI. Who isn't?